Welcome to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I am your host, Fernandito Osa, and today my guest is Superintendent Eugene Sumpter. He is out of Suffolk County Jail.
Superintendent.
Superintendent.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good.
So the first question I wanted to ask you is, tell us a little bit about your story in the department and how it was then and what it's like today.
Well, I started with the department back in 1989. It was a time when the city of Boston was at turmoil due to some things that were going on outside with a huge case called the Charles Stewart case. I started at the jail right around that time. So Charles Street was a very different place to work back in those days. I think that the mentality there and what was thought of by the public was that you put people in jail, you lock them up, and throw away the key. And that was kind of how we operated back in those days. And a lot of problems came about due to that, due to the lack of training, the lack of resources, working out of a building that was antiquated. Charles Street Jail was built in 1851. So when I stepped foot into Charles Street in 1989, the building was already 130 plus years old. The conditions were very bad there. So to move from there to the Suffolk County Jail at Nashua Street into a building that had modern technology, was a much better quality of life for the detainee and the inmate that was housed there, was something that was great for all of us, but it was also better working conditions for the staff. Back at Charles Street, there was problems with climate control. There was no air conditioning, so summers were very long and hot. Winters, there was heat, but in that environment where everything is open, the climate there was very bad even in the wintertime. So to move into a building where you had circulation of air, things that people take for granted, it was nice to move into a building that now had the proper air circulation, had cleanliness to it, everything was new, the equipment was new, the officers, all staff felt very good about working there, coming from Charles Street. So it was a very good environment to move into coming from Charles Street. As far as the difference between the two, I think the biggest thing was the training. Back when I started at Charles Street, there was very little training for staff. For a number of reasons. We didn't have the resources, and even if the resources were available, funding wouldn't allow for it. So there were a lot of issues in regards to training. So back in those days as an officer, you walked in and basically were thrown a set of keys and told to go work the tiers. And fast forward to today, where we now have a 12 to 13 week academy for all staff, for the uniformed staff before they begin to work. We're teaching them everything they need to know about how to deal with the population, how to communicate with the population, how to keep themselves safe and others safe, emergency plans, which is always a big deal in the correctional environment. These are all things that we didn't receive at Charles Street. So now today at Suffolk County Jail at Nashua Street, we're confident in our employees' ability to do their job because they're confident based on the training that they're receiving.
Oh, good. That leads me to my next question. Could you describe a little bit about your job on sort of day-to-day operations?
Well, I'm the facility superintendent of the Suffolk County Jail, and my responsibilities, most importantly, are to make sure that the quality of life for the detainees, the safety and security for the officers, the conditions of confinement are always adequate. And so how does that happen? That has to happen by me making sure that I have a hand in the daily operation of everything that goes on day to day within that facility. It starts with staffing in the morning and making sure that we have adequate staffing. Programs for the detainees and services, making sure that they're being provided with their meals, they're being provided with medical or health services. We allow them to have visitation. I'm responsible for also making sure that detainees and inmates make it to court on time. So there's a lot of different working parts within the facility, and it's my responsibility to make sure that everyone that works below me is doing their part. We work in a field where it's bigger than any one person that works there. Everyone there has a job to do, and everyone comes to work knowing what their responsibility is. And without each individual responsibility, the jail doesn't run. All it takes is one person from one area, and it doesn't have to be a uniformed officer. It could be someone working in some other area. If we're not all doing our jobs correctly and to the best of our ability, then we can have problems there. And because the staff understands that, and because we provide the type of training to help them understand what their role is, and we formulate policy and procedure to make sure that they understand what their job is, I think they can be confident in how they do the job every day.
For our viewers who might not know, could you explain a little bit about the differences between what the Suffolk County Jail and the House of Correction?
Yes, the differences are, well, the Suffolk County Jail, which replaced the Charles Street Jail, is a pretrial detention facility. So we're responsible for everyone that goes to court and is being held in custody by the courts and committed to the jail. Whether they have a bail or no bail, they're coming to the jail. They're our responsibility. At the House of Correction, that's a sentenced facility. And it's a house of a correction where individuals that are sentenced to 2.5 years or less can end up in the House of Correction. Now, what has changed over the last 10 to 15 years is due to overcrowding, both institutions are kind of doing dual functions. For instance, at the House of Correction, because the jail over the years had been overcrowded, they take in detainees over at the House of Correction. So they're doing a lot of jail functions for my detainees that are housed over at the House of Correction. At the jail, I also have a unit full of sentenced individuals from South Bay. And just to talk a little bit briefly about how that transpired.
Please.
Back in, I believe, 2005, around 2005, I had females at the jail. So I had one unit of females, and the rest of the entire facility was male. And I had a problem with getting the females involved with the type of programming that I could give to the males because they had to be separated. So it became very tough to give them even the basic services of religious services to be able to practice religion. Some of the classes that we had available for NA and AA, it was tougher to get volunteers to kind of split to do the men and the women. At the same time I was having that issue at the Suffolk County Jail, the superintendent at the house at that time was having a problem with the ability for inmates from the House Correction to earn good time. Didn't have enough work for them to do over there. So we made a deal back then. It was a good time to bring the females that were housed at Nashville Street and bring them over to the House Correction so they could get the services with the women that were already over at the House Correction. And then bring a unit full of guys from the House Correction that were sentenced that could provide me with services for working around the facility, whether it be working in the kitchen and doing food services. The jail puts out over 2,000 meals per day. Without the inmates from South Bay, that would be a very tough thing to do. So we have a unit full of House Correction inmates that have come over, and they have the ability to earn their good time and also provide services for the jail. So it was a twofold good way of making sure that the inmates got their good time, and also my females from the jail that now Superintendent Smith can now take credit for, is her providing the good programming that she's providing for those women who otherwise would have never been able to get the quality of programming that they're getting now.
Right. And that also leads me to my next question, which is when you started at the old Charles Street Jail, can you tell us a little bit about what it was there like and the difference now? And you kind of were elaborating a little bit about the difference on that now. So, but is there anything you wanted to elaborate there? Because I mean, I know today, we know today it's a whole different building, it's a whole different scene where it used to be, and it's a trademark on a different level, but
Well, if you think about it, we're at a different time
yes.
in society anyway. So, I mean, not only has the building changed, yes, it was nice to move into a nicer building, but society has changed its views on what should happen to people that are in jail. I think as correctional professionals, we've changed our views over the many years on how we deal with people that are in a correctional setting. And that's based on just gaining knowledge from around the country on better practices, being innovative. That's one thing I can say about the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. We're the innovators. We're going to find out the best way to do things, and even when we think we're doing things the best, we're going to look for ways to even do them better. And I think that's what we'll continue to do. But the population has changed. I would say, from my experience, that the 19 or 20-year-old who was arrested and sent to Charles Street Jail back in the late 80s, early 90s is much different than the 18-year-old who's coming to the Suffolk County Jail today. Well, it's just a different generation. With that comes the necessity to learn how to manage the different population. And not only has the population changed, but the workforce has changed, because there's a different generation that's also working with us. So I think what I have at the jail is the best of both worlds. I have a workforce that who have been there as long as I have. So there's hundreds of years of experience. These are people that have seen just about everything and know how to react to it, but also know that they're still learning. And then I have a workforce full of young, eager to learn officers and other employees that really want to do the right thing and be a part of this great department that we have. And when you put those two together, the experienced person who's willing to teach and also willing to continue to learn as things change, you put them together with the new officer or the new employee that's just trying to figure themselves out and what their career is going to be and whether or not this is somewhere they want to stay. You put those two together, I think it becomes something special, and that's what's happened at the jail. We've got a workforce that works together. They come from all different walks of life, but they've come together as a family with one common goal, and that's care, custody, control, treating people with dignity and respect, and most importantly, going home at the end of their shifts safely and keeping the inmates safe.
Right. I know you were formerly in the armed forces prior to becoming a member of the department. Could you please talk a little bit about your experience and how it prepared you to work?
Well, as a young man, I did 6 years in the United States Army, and 4 of those years were prior to me coming to work for the department. And so as a young man, I always said that, anyone that joins the armed forces, especially at an early age, it really gives you the opportunity to learn responsibility, to pay attention to detail, how to be professional. It taught me at an early age that you have to grow up at an early age. I got a chance to do a lot of traveling. I saw a lot of things at a young age. And so while I believe that helped me when I came into this field, I don't know that there's anything that will prepare you for a career in corrections or working in jails. I think that experience comes, while the military was a nice experience, I think that was just one form of experience for me. When it comes to jails, it took years for me to understand the impact that a department like mine and that employees have on a person's life while they're incarcerated. And so I think while it was two very different things, I think that the military did prepare me in that I developed maturity a lot earlier than some people that never went into the military. And I think that's very helpful at a young age when you're working inside a jail.
And talking about that, about the working inside the jail, and the next question actually takes me into that, is talk a little bit about the seriousness of the mental health and substance abuse in the population in the jail.
Yeah, well, the jail population, mental health has been a problem since I was an officer. We have become the mental health hospital. Most county jails around this country has become the mental health hospital for the mentally ill. For the jail, what's important is for us to try to identify who those people are as early as possible. So as we talked earlier about the difference between the jail and the house of correction, when the house correction gets a person for sentence, there's a very good chance or a likelihood that that person was already in custody somewhere else. So there's been that opportunity to evaluate them and figure out what their issues are and try to get ahead of them and get them the support and the services they need prior to sentencing. At the jail, we don't have that opportunity. In most cases, there's a new person coming through the door that we've never seen and that we don't know. And at the time when they walk through the door may not be presenting with mental health issues. You know, if a person goes to, gets arrested on a Friday night from the police department, spends the weekend in the lockup at the police department, goes to court on Monday morning, and then comes to the jail on Monday afternoon or evening, well, that person may be in a very different space on Monday evening when they get to the jail than they were when they got arrested on Friday night. If they're someone that was on medication daily and they haven't been taking it since Friday, and now it's Monday evening, we may be seeing a very different person. In some cases, that's great for us because now we can see him coming through the door, know he has issues, and we can try to address it from the beginning. But what about the person who doesn't spend the weekend there and they get arrested the night before and they come to the jail the next day and they don't present with those issues? It may take a while before we're able to identify that there's a problem. And so that's the challenge that the staff at the jail have to deal with every single day. We've got an excellent medical department, excellent mental health division that really, once they get their hands on the people that have the issues, they're there to help them and they do a good job at that. But we're not always guaranteed to know when we're going to find out that person has the mental health issues. So that's always a big challenge for us at the jail.
Thank you. I know that you were a supervisor of training. Could you tell us a little bit about the training and the importance of the department with respect to safety and rehabilitation?
Yeah, training is a very big part of.
I know we touched a little bit on it at the beginning, but
the success we've had in the department as a whole, not just at the jail at Nashua Street, but as a whole, South Bay and Nashua Street. We've been able to enhance our training over the years, and thanks to the staff that I was lucky enough to be a part of early on in my career. I did about 10 years of training myself. I instructed in the use of force and firearms and defensive tactics, and I did that for several years prior to coming into the administration aspect of things. And we've been able to see that training is very important. It's not the be-all, end-all. You need more than training. You need common sense. We need a good, strong policy and procedure that outlines what staff are supposed to do. We need to be able to make sure that that policy and procedure is following the guidelines set forth in, the regulations by the state. And when you have those three things working together, a staff that knows what their responsibilities are, understands the policy and procedure, they're trained in how to do it, then we're in a much better place. And it makes people more confident in how they do their job. You can hold people accountable, and people aren't afraid of being held accountable when they know what it is they're supposed to do and that it's clearly outlined for them. And I think what we try to do as a department is stay on top of what our policies and procedures are, how we go about implementing them, making sure there's staff buy-in and participation in how we develop those policies. And whenever you do that, you're going to have a better workforce that kind of understands the mission of the sheriff.
Right. What are some of the challenges that you faced in respect to the population that you oversee? I think you mentioned a little mental health.
Yeah, the mental health is a tough piece, but classification is also a very tough piece for us. Like I said, we have individuals coming in from different walks of life. They're from all sections of Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, Revere, and you're taking upwards of 700 individuals and putting them in one building together and asking them to get along. In my household, I can't get my kids to get along, and that's a small household. So imagine putting 700 people from all different walks of life, different beliefs in the same facility and thinking that they're going to get along. So it's kind of tough for the staff to kind of pick through who's who. There's gang issues, there's substance abuse issues, there's mental health issues. There's so many different things that they have to look at in order to make sure that their shift goes as safely and securely as possible for themselves, for their partners, for the detainee population. So it's very important that they rely on their training, that they understand what the mental health issues are, and try to get ahead of some of that stuff before it occurs. Now, with that said, when everything's running on all cylinders and we think everything's great and everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, can we still have issues? Absolutely, and that's on a daily basis. That's a part of jail. But we have less of those issues when our staff are paying close attention to the population and kind of getting to understand them and communicating with them. And we've found over the years communication has been key, interpersonal communications, and kind of getting to understand who the individuals are that we have in our custody.
Okay, we have about 30 seconds left, and I wanted to ask you the last question. Some of the myths and perceptions that people might have about correction officers at the jail, anything you'd like to correct on that, or what you would correct?
Well, I mean, there's if you watch TV, then there's plenty to kind of make your own assessment of what you think it is. And I call it not so reality TV. If you take that away and look at the people, the men and women that work in that department, they are people that are dedicated to what they do. They believe in rehabilitation. They believe in the sheriff's mission. And they come to work every day wanting to accomplish that mission. And for people out there that think that correction officers don't have a heart, they don't have compassion, that's not the case. These are professionals. They've been trained as professionals. A lot of them have been there for many years and have learned the business and kind of understand the population that it serves. And I think that's the most important thing. So that's what I would want everyone out there to know, is that the people that work at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department are there to do the job of the public and to take care of the people that are committed to the jail.
Thank you, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
That's common ground.